able to enter the chat and tell us their name and their pronoun and where they're logging in from. We'd love to hear from you folks. And I'm not seeing anything going on in the chat, so I'm not sure. Can you hear us? Is this good? Okay. Oh, thank you. Yay, Christy from Poughkeepsie, New York. She, hers. Shaban, hi, here in San Francisco. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. And I think we should go ahead and get started. Ashley in Myrtle Beach, she, her. Thank you so much for joining us, Ashley. It was nice you joined us last week too. Thank you. I am Karen Fleshman. I founded Racy Conversations in 2014 with the mission of inspiring the anti-racist generation. And several years ago, I had the tremendous pleasure of attending Sweetwater Nannauck's Decolonizing Our Activism workshop here in San Francisco. And I highly, highly recommend participating in Sweetwater's workshops. It was very powerful, very transformative for me. And that's why I'm grateful that she has maintained contact with me, and we've had many conversations since then. And I'm really grateful for her, especially at this time of so much disease, that we have the opportunity to talk about reclaiming our health care and of learning from someone who has so much wisdom to share with us. And I'm really gonna take a back seat here, and we're just gonna listen to Sweetwater. She has her Idle No More Washington is her website, idlenomorewashington.com. And she has a Facebook page. I highly recommend joining that. And with that, hi, Yvette from Occupied Ohlone land in Oakland, California. Thank you so much, Yvette, for joining us. And Sweetwater, we'd love to hear from you about yourself and your perspective and your activism and the kind of education you do.
All right, thank you so much for having me, Karen, and thank you all for joining us today. I'll start out with introducing myself. Tlinuxin yuchat duasak, ishbuwada ayachat, kiksadi yadi chatsati, seat quedi dutchkunk, aslish yeshadi kla nanyaish takin kwarnayakhat. My name is Sweetwater Nannauck. I'm from the Kilauea clan of the Tsimshian Nation from Alaska. My father's from the Raven Frog clan of the Tlingit Nation, and my grandfather is from the Glacier People clan. My great-grandmother, Yesh Yarikwa, was a precious grandchild of the Upper Living People clan on the Stikine River, and it's an honor to be here today. I'm the director and founder of Idle No More Washington, based in Seattle, and we used to do a lot of support in the Native community here, in supporting our different issues impacting our people in this area. And because of a lot of really actually negative experiences with non-natives activists, I started putting together these workshops to teach other folks about decolonizing our activism. I have a 4-part series regarding that. It's not just for activists also, but I have many community members, college students, high school students. So I give the one about the history of colonization regarding Native people is the first in that series, then healing historical trauma because of colonization, and then spiritual activism, why the activism that we do as Native people comes from our heart and our spirit. And from what I have seen from a lot of conventional non-Native activists, they seem to come from a place of fear, a place of ego, and why following spirit has a positive impact in the work that we're doing, and also healing ourselves too. So the last part of that series I call the 7th fire, which is based on an Anishinaabe prophecy about people coming together. And a lot of indigenous prophecies talk about the times that we're in now, that we see it's time to come together. A lot of them say that indigenous and specifically women will be leading this movement, and that's what I see across the world. So I have other workshops too that I have about white fragility, I call Fragile No More, and give workshops with Native youth and others. But before we get started, I would like to offer a prayer for all of us joining us, for those, our relatives, our friends who are on the front lines, our healthcare workers, our, people working in the grocery stores, the farmers, the truck drivers, and all the people who are in the hospitals and alone and without their family and are hurting and in pain. So if you'd like to join me in prayer, we can start off in a good way. And if you work with natives, you'll find that we pray at all of our events, all of our meetings, all of our conferences, and including this time. So please join me in your own ways and practices. Dikiam kawuchagachi, ha'ayi ha'ishatu sadakiyayati, dagachasai ayi sayi. Dahat kagud hatlaki kadei ayi. Da klakunach ayi yakugach to sitia dayi. Chaawi de kia huhan. Hajitia ya gikatlikwa. Kacha ade ye na uhan. Asla uskei. Fekha shigudikuhan katlinkayi. Katuha hasane huhan. Dian kawu jida. Ya sati atlaki kade. Ka ikatsini. Katuitlatsayi. Dikiach cha'a slagu. Kunilchief is a handi kiam kawu. Kahashigina. Kahashuka. Lewe. So be it. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. So I'd like to start off just talking about reclaiming our healthcare. And a lot of what I do is based on decolonizing and how colonization has impacted us as Native people, and really people all across the world. And for those learning about this colonization, how the military, economic, cultural oppression has dominated our people, and people of color, really. It includes invasion, settlement, internal colonialism, and neocolonialism. And because of, today we also have settler colonialisms that have come here. Many people have come here from across the world, and in large numbers that have claimed this land, and now are the majority. Post-colonial colonialism, many times people think of colonization as something in the past. That wasn't me, that hasn't, I haven't done anything, it was my ancestors. But it's a continuous process. We haven't ever fully recovered, and continue to be colonized. And so former colonies can, they cannot shake off that colonial legacy that they have carried. Continues today. I'll be talking about perspective from the Native people. It's based on indigenous decolonization, which have been infected from genocide and forced cultural assimilation. But learning about the history of our colonization is some of the first steps in healing from this. And also reclaiming and rediscovering our traditions, our language, our cultural values and teachings that have been passed on to us. So, indigenizing, I call it, or indigenization, recognizes our traditional worldviews and our knowledge, our traditional knowledge and our perspectives. And it also identifies opportunities to be expressed, incorporated into our indigenous ways of knowing and doing. So that's what I focus on in the workshops that I give. So I'll be, I'm talking today about how colonization has impacted Native people. As many of you know, the European diseases that were brought here have decimated our tribes and our people. 50 to 90%, their estimations. The first document of smallpox epidemic began in 1518. So our people have been continuously impacted by this since then. Even in this area, I'm in Seattle area, the Northwest tribes, they estimate up to 95%. I'm doing genealogy and learning about my own family. And like on my mother's side, I found that my grandmother, my mother's mother, was one of 14 children. And she was one of the youngest. She was like 2 or 3 of them were the only ones that survived in her family, because they were infected. It could be tuberculosis, smallpox, flu, whooping cough, many things that continuously harmed our people with no protection from it, no vaccinations till much later. Some of the first biological warfare was used against us from these diseases. Over on the East Coast, during 1763, Pontiac's War, they called it, when the British and the French were fighting over those territories in that. And after the French lost, the British had agreed with the local natives in that area to leave, but they didn't. And so there continued to be warfare and fighting. And so this is Lord Jeffrey Amherst, who was the first one to use biological warfare. And he ordered his men to give natives their smallpox blankets. Many of you may have heard about that. And this is the guy. There's even a town named after him, a statue they honor. And this is a common thing we see throughout, these so-called leaders being honored, such as Columbus and stuff. So our people have, and even our ways of healing and knowing was impacted. So say traditionally, many of our Native people looked at illness, it was different. Sometimes it was, our medicine people believe from a loss of soul lost, in which, in our area, they would, they call it journeying by canoe. They would go, the medicine people would go and travel and bring back their spirit. Or sometimes it's based on maybe breaking of a taboo, or it could be also caused by someone else through bad medicine. But a lot of our ways were seen as evil and primitive. And so we didn't have all these diseases or ways of combating it or healing from it. The white Western ways of medicine came from England. These are the first doctors here in Washington area. And so it was really based on usually white men who were in charge of the medical care. A long time ago, only people who had money could afford medical care. And so, a lot of this we see continuing today based on those concepts. It's really based on a system of white supremacy, too. It's not like it just continues to change. They make out by different names. That is really based on this system that's systemic, that's cultural, that's, so we continue to see this and through our healthcare today, too. In colonization, too, how has that impacted us? Native people, one of the things I'm seeing, too, the negative was lateral violence because of forced assimilation, our ancestors sent to boarding schools, and we're seeing this played out now today. We're seeing it because of the CARES Act, that the stimulus the government is supposed to distribute, and we're not seeing the trillions of dollars as it was given to Wall Street or corporations. You know, for natives, they designated 8 billion, which is really pennies compared to the corporate system. And so they really, what it comes down to, we see it's an old playbook of making us, pitting us against each other and fighting against each other. And so we're seeing that too. And because of Alaska is, you know, so the government quit making treaties with natives in 1871. Alaska became a state in 1959. And we also, so we have a different system set up there, and which is corporations and not reservations. And the land is distributed differently. And so they are not tribal governments, agencies, these Alaska Native corporations. But because of the laws, they were using old laws from 1975. And trying to designate the corporations to receive some of this funding. So it's been a big battle. It's ongoing right now. So this is some of the ways that is still impacting us today. I wanted to know about what is our people doing, you know, positively to reclaim our healthcare. So I'm just sharing a few examples. There's many out there, but because of time constraints, I'm keeping it really short. What I see is a lot of people reclaiming their traditional practices and their ways of healing, you know. Even me, I used to do work with some of the hospitals here in that area of Seattle, and go to the hospitals and pray with, you know, with Native people. We have our traditional medicines, practices, storytelling, or sharing our stories is very healing. And it's really what I see as a first step in our healing process. We have our medicines and ceremonies. It's more holistic in our approach. Another thing that I'm seeing today too with this COVID is many people saying that we need more Native people in the medical system, and people of color too, because we you know, we need to be there to support our people. And this is one of the programs that I see that's a really very successful program in helping Native people to get into medical school and support for them and helping them graduate and continue this process to support our people. So it's a good thing. When I used to work for the University of Washington as a researcher, and we worked for the Partnerships for Native Health and worked in an 8-state region. And I would have to go to many Native conferences. And I remember somebody saying at one point that when they first started these conferences, they would meet in a hotel room and there was just a handful of them. And now there's, you know, even on my way down to Portland, I would take the train. I travel a lot by train when I'm you know, going to give presentations. And there was this white lady sitting next to me, and you know, we got to talking, and she was asking me, you know, what I was doing, and I told her, and she was like, "Natives go to college? Natives become doctors?" Like she couldn't believe it. I guess she said she grew up it's near Native reservations, but you know, her stereotypes of natives was very negative. So no, but we're out there, but we need more, definitely, and support them. They need a lot of support, is what I find too. I had a friend who contacted me about students here. Like one student was from Alaska and wanted our traditional food. And so I had some of our seaweed, so I sent it to them. And that student was so happy just to get some of our traditional foods. You know, it's our medicine. Our culture is medicine, really. Here's another amazing, great project here too. Is based here and up by the Lummi Reservation. And so what I'm seeing a lot is our traditional ways and our ways of healing. And and how is that positively impacting our people. And coming up with our own words, our traditional ways into the studies that are being done, and how we can support that and work together with, within this system to focusing on our spiritual, cultural traditions. It's much more family oriented, community oriented, rather than based individualistically, which Western culture has taught our people to be. This was interesting to find an insurance synthesis in Washington that covers our traditional healing practices. So I wonder if there's more out there in other states too. But I found that very pretty awesome to see that, because a lot of the work that we're being done and for our healing practices needs to come from our spiritual strength and our ways of healing. So, I wonder if anyone had any questions or comments before I move on.
Yes, if anyone has questions or comments, I have the chat box open on my computer so I can take your questions and share them with Sweetwater. And as people are asking questions, I have a question for you. How does settler colonialism impact Natives' health today?
Well, it has negatively impacted our people because of our loss of our traditional ways. For example, our ways of eating. I grew up in Alaska, where a large percentage, I don't know, most of the food we ate was our traditional foods that we gathered and prepared ourselves every summer, spring and summer. And so our loss of our traditional foods, for example, and has led to high rates of diabetes within our people, or heart disease, or cancers. Many people in my village have cancer now. And so it has continued, and these disparities are impacting us today too because of the COVID-19. As many have seen that these disparities negatively impact us and make us a higher likelihood of dying from this disease than those who don't have it. And so it continues to cause harm, and getting the care we need too. For example, the CARES Act. I mean, the government we have treaty rights that the tribes have signed with the government. In these treaties, ceding the land we have, they're supposed to also provide us health care, education, protect our lands. So it's been a struggle. It's taken this long already. And even before this, we weren't getting the health care we needed. And it was based on a Western ways of doing things. And so we're seeing that now today, and how is that affecting our people? The Navajo Nation is severely impacted with a very high rate of COVID cases, and high rates of people dying from it. I guess they're the third per capita in the country, the whole country, and it's really bad. And we need to support them. We need those finances. We need people help, more care, more people going to help them, more whatever resources they need. So it's been very super bad.
I think it's so important to Sweetwater that we don't allow this to become a narrative that the reason why Native people, Black people, brown people are disproportionately dying from this disease is not because there's some kind of racial or difference between people and they're more prone to succumb to it, or that they're more prone to succumb to these comorbidities like the heart disease and diabetes and and other asthma conditions, but that all of that is rooted in racism. The reason why there's higher rates of these comorbidity diseases is not because of there's something that makes other people more genetically prone to this, but because of racism, and not having access to healthy food and healthy living environments and things of that nature, as well as the psychological and spiritual harm caused by racism. Because I think that's really, really important, as well as then when Native people, when Black and Brown people go in for treatment, they're not given the care that I would be given if I went in to seek treatment.
Right. You're not getting the proper care, and not get, the ventilators, for example. And I'm seeing a lot of the data is not accurate too. Like many times with Native people, the checkbox is other instead of, so the data is skewed with Native people. And in looking at who does get the ventilators to help them survive. And they claim it's not based on race. And I see this happening all over, not just the United States, but other countries too, that they claim it's based on, their health disparities, that race isn't involved, but it is. It is. And there's many times a denial of it. And I know that's been happening here in this area. They're denying it's not race. It has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with it. And getting, the access to that care. So it's really difficult, and it's so hard to see and watch our people suffering this way.
Ashley asks, how can we best support our Native community members during their healing? I have a friend who recently shared that she is choosing to heal naturally and traditionally as her ancestors did. It's a relevant topic in my life, so I very much appreciate this session.
Yes, it is. It's important. Our traditional ways and practices is our medicine. As even for me, I haven't been to a doctor in years, and I only go when I'm almost dying, which has happened many times from many things, illnesses. But I treat myself. So, and this is some of the things I want to be able to teach other folks in my workshops is how to listen to our body. So say for example, when I had 4 slip discs and I was bedridden for 6 months, I would pray and meditate every day. And then I would ask my body, what are we going to work on today? And it might hurt a little bit. My back might hurt. Maybe my knees might hurt. Maybe my feet might hurt, just a tiny bit. And then I just bring my awareness down to there and ask my body, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And I remember one time I did it on my neck. My neck was out really bad. And I just put my hand on my neck. I was at the chiropractor. And I just focused on that and said, how you doing? And my neck said, I'm hurting. I'm in pain. And I asked, well, what is causing this pain? And I just wait for the answer. I said, you're stubborn. And then yeah, I am stubborn. And then I just waited to see, where did this begin? Where did it originate? And then I could see myself as a little girl being really upset and mad at my dad because he was drinking. And I was just a little girl, I don't know, 4 maybe. And I would get really mad at him. He would have to pick me up from daycare. And if he was late, I knew he was drinking, and I was very mad. And he said I would get mad at him and I wouldn't talk to him for a week. And I would just snap my eyes when he tried to talk to me. But it was my stubbornness as a little girl. And then how did it change over the years too? Like I'm stubborn about, social justice and things. And I may just stick to my principles about it. And so I'm like, okay. So I go back and do address that stubbornness. And it's kind of like you're going back, rewinding, and asking, what can I do to heal this? And I just wait for the answer. And then I could see myself like speaking to that little girl that when you grow up, I said, yeah, it was saying like, yes, your father is drinking a lot, and it's hard for you to watch that. But years from now, when you grow up, you're going to pray for him, and he's going to quit drinking. He's going to have a bad accident. He did fall and hit his head on the pavement and had a major blood clot on his brain. But that's what it took for him to quit drinking. And he became my strongest prayer warrior. So I was just telling that to my little girl self back then, that you're going to pray and he will quit. And he's going to be your main supporter and prayer warrior. So I did that healing work at that time. But I think all of us are able to do this on our own. And I'm trying to learn how I can teach others and share others how they can do this. So that's the spiritual part. And then looking at, say, like what is our what are we eating? You know, when I work with people, I ask what's going on mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and then start. And we're here to heal, like, for the rest of our lives. You know, I'll never stop healing until I go home and meet my ancestors. It's an ongoing process, and to help and support one another throughout this work. And so I, you know, I don't live in Alaska. My dad's not around anymore. He used to send me care packages from Alaska, our traditional foods. That I eat right, you know. I exercise every day for a half hour. I do my prayers and meditations when I wake up first thing in the morning, you know, and may do some healing work at that time if things come up. And especially now is actually a good time to do it, since we're stuck at home. It's really a good time to go within and work on our healing process for ourselves. And so it's asking the right question. Where did this originate? You know, how can I heal this? And is there anything else I can do? So sometimes I'll do a prayer at night and get the answer the next morning of what I can do. And so even with my dad, he came down here. We brought him down from Alaska when he was diagnosed with colon cancer. So he was my first patient. And I would just pray every day, what do I need to do? And I would wait for an answer from Spirit. Okay, we need to change his diet. So I had to get him off coffee. He used to drink 5 pots of coffee a day, eat red meat and processed foods, cakes and sweets and stuff. And so I would, okay. And luckily I had a case of his, he used to send us a case of sockeye, a couple cases that he would get every year. So I had that. So I let him eat our traditional foods. You know, here, Dad, eat this. I had seaweed or seal grease, and he loved it. He's used to eating that way. And so his food, and I would pray with him and address what the healing that needed to take place. And with him, you know, it was him, because like when I was with him when we were children, you know, he was more of a weekend warrior. But later on, he was just full-blown alcoholic, although he worked hard and he drank hard. And so the healing, you know, I'd ask, well, what do we need to heal this? And he carried guilt with him about it. I remember he used to call me up when he was drinking, and he, you know, late at night, and he was drunk, saying, I was a terrible dad. I was a horrible dad. I was like, yeah, you were, but quit calling me so late at night. And so he carried that guilt. So when I prayed about it, it was forgiveness. Mm. So I said, I sat him down and talked with him, Dad. This is, I feel hurt. And I just name it that you left us. And he did. He left us to go work up on the North Slope. That's how I ended up being raised by my grandparents. And you went on to become an alcoholic. I feel like you didn't love me. What I need from you is for you to apologize to me and to just so that I know that you love me. And so he did. And then after that, I was praying about it. And the next day I could hear Spirit say, well, he hurt a lot of people when he was drinking. Maybe he needs to apologize to them. So I told him that. So he spent the whole day calling people and apologizing to people, And he'd think of more people. I mean, he was on the phone for hours.
Mm.
And you could just see this, like he was shining. Like it was lifted off of him. And he even apologized to my mom. They haven't spoke together in 35 years or something. He wanted me to call my mom. And I called her. And I said, my dad wants to talk to you. She's like, what does he want? I said, well, he wants to apologize to you for the way he treated you when you guys were married. And she didn't want to talk to him. She's like, well, I forgave him a long time ago. And I'm like, no, Mom, he has something to say, and I think you need to hear it. And I just gave him. And he did, and she accepted it. It was so beautiful. And it grew from there. And that's, I believe, was the main healing for him of his cancer. And it spread. More people started healing. More people in my family started apologizing to each other. And even his church, his minister said, I think we'll have a forgiveness day for families to apologize to each other. Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
Oh
So
my
the
gosh.
process of healing is identifying and asking the right question. Where did it originate? What can we do to heal? How can we help support him now? So that's what I would do with my dad in every step of the way. It wasn't easy. It was hard work. And it is. Healing is hard work. It's painful. It will bring stuff up. It will, it will make you feel things. And you don't have to live in that, be stuck in that. It's just enough to let it go. But we also have that intention to do that work at the time. So yeah, it was very, very powerful for the healing process.
I'm feeling healed and transformed just listening to that story. And I wanted to ask you, sometimes, so much of the focus is on how Native people were harmed by settler colonialism, but how were white people harmed by settler colonialism? And what do you think the healing process looks like for white people?
Well, I in my workshops, I recommend people learn about their own ancestors
Mm-hmm.
and learn what happened to them because of colonization. And for example, I learned last April, maybe, or March last year, because I started doing genealogy and learning about my ancestors. And I found that I have an ancestor who came from Ireland, which I never knew about before. And I had dreams about it beforehand and during that time. And so I acknowledged that part of me. And I start praying for healing of that ancestor and those people. And before the settlers came here, they had already been impacted by colonization, hundreds and thousands of years before they brought it to these shores. And that's also the process of colonization. It just continues and continues. And so learning about what happened to your ancestors and praying about it. Some people ask, well, they don't know who their ancestors are. Maybe they were adopted, or maybe their great-grandparents never talked to them about it. But I found that praying about it is very helpful. Praying for their healing, praying for their guidance too. Because everything they've that our people, Native people, been through, they've already experienced. For instance, I was starting to research it myself and found some, watched some reading about it. I was reading about it, found some things on YouTube and about colonization, and I would see these kids. I think they were Welsh in school, and they were speaking their language, and they were punished just like Native people were too. Their mouths were washed out, or they were beaten, or they were put in the corner. And so, and that's the horrible legacy of colonization. It continues. What we have learned, we continue and pass on. And so it's important in order for our healing to do. And as white people can do this. I've had several friends who've come to my workshops have started learning about their own history of colonization, their own ancestry. I have friends who are going to Scotland or going to Ireland or going back. And that's what it is retracing those steps. How can we heal it? And you'll find, at least for me, I feel like I'm helping heal a part of me I didn't know existed.
Mm.
And then, and also, part of the healing process too is like, what can we do now? What can we do better? Because part of the healing is, so it's kind of like taking away blocks from us that are keeping us from really our purpose, what we're here to do. And we're, our connection to one another. And it helps not just heal us, but Mother Earth. Because as many Native people believe, Mother Earth is a reflection of us. We're a reflection of Mother Earth. So as we're healing, we're also healing the Earth. And as you're seeing now, it's just amazing things going on with the Earth is healing. And the animals coming back. And the air, clean air and clean water. It's a really exciting time, although there's a lot of bad things happening too. There's very awesome opportunity right now for healing. And so in healing that too, I'll share some of these things about the historical trauma and some symptoms. And I look at this, and I felt all these at one time or another in my life too. And but with this historical trauma too, we have within us the ability for this healing. And doing this healing work too, when I pray for others, I pray that this healing, the trauma that happened, be healed on that land. And then send the prayers out in the healing that it heal other people who may have suffered similar traumas too. So it's not just us individually. And I think that's a lot of difference too with Natives as healing, is that we haven't forgotten our connection to each other and helping to heal, And so I would do some prayers for me and myself, and other family members might feel it. They might feel that healing. But the thing is, it will bring up things that are painful. But if you sit with it and really your intention is on the healing, it will come. And as you take that first steps, more will come to you what you should be doing. And the people coming together, because we're here to help one another in the process. I mean, you're an answer to my prayer too, even in doing this work. Karen and all those who are sitting with us today, those who are listening, that we have a piece of this puzzle of a larger picture, and we're here, to offer that prayer and medicine to others in this healing process for us, future generations too. Because it's a good time, and that's a paradox of it, and paradox of healing. It's painful, but it's also good at the same time. It's hard to explain.
Mm. Yes, it is painful, but it's very liberating. I think just like what you were describing with your father, sometimes we carry such deep shame for the harm that we've caused that we don't want to face it, and we don't want to look in the mirror, and we certainly don't want to look into the eyes of the people we've harmed and admit to the harm that we've caused. But when we do, there's so much transformation that occurs, and such a relief of the burden of carrying all that shame and guilt, the release of that, and the healing when we share with the person who we harmed, oh, I harmed you, and I recognize that, and I'm really sorry, and I'm transforming, and I'm not going to do it again. I think that is very powerful for the person who was harmed. And with that like, how can we heal the relationship between Native people and white people?
Well, the first step, is listening. One of the things I recommend for white people to do is to listen to us. And the way of our communication is different.
Mm-hmm.
We may say things, I may say things just once, and if I'm not being listened to and not heard, I may just walk away. I might shake my head. And then, like, what is our communication style? What does working together look like? I see that many times too. That's very difficult because of and a lot of, I think, is from colonization too, our perceptions of Native people. So I call them colonial moments when, I have to deal with non-natives who want to tokenize our Native people, marginalize us, co-opt our work or our movements, and so I call it a colonial intervention when I have to talk to people about it. And so it's difficult to have, but I've found addressing it immediately when it happens. I stick to the facts, not how my feelings, not what you're feeling. This is what happened, why it was harmful, and then giving them and keeping it on point and brief. And what I want, and many responses I get, good responses are people who listen, acknowledge their wrongdoing, apologize appropriately. I'm sorry I was tokenizing you, and what I plan to do in the future is, I will listen to you. I will honor your spirit, your soul, your work, and I will learn how to do things in a good way. And, you say what you're going to do differently. So it's not easy. Many people have bad responses from it. I've had people who cry, who get angry, who get defensive. They get fragile. They call it fragility, and or else they may I call them the flying monkeys. Well, their flying monkeys come in to attack. Usually they may get some of their friends, or maybe they have a friend who they use as a token Indian to come in and say, well, this is all right because this person says, I was doing nothing wrong. So pitting us against each other. Mm. So learning how to do things in a good way and work together, it's a process. And people, we're learning and healing too. So, if I see people that are trying, I will give them a little slack. I may say something and say it very more gently, maybe. But if they're just coming at me with, just in a really derogatory way, I'll have to be a little more blunt with them. And so, those who are learning, I'll continue. I mean, I have friends who've done that too to me, but I see that they're trying, and so I'm like, yeah, I as long as they continue the process, I will support them and still remain friends, remain in contact with them, and help them and support them on their journey too. but it has to be an effort on both parts. And part of it is the healing process of like what has led us up today to us today. For example, I do share a story regarding work I used to do at as a researcher at the University of Washington. And I found out too, when my dad was down here for his cancer treatment, he talked about, you know, he started talking about his experience at boarding school, which he's never done before. So I was like, oh, well, how was that for you, Dad? And he said he remembered when one time, because the boarding school was far away from our island. And on that, where he was at, there was a boarding school and there was a hospital nearby. And he said one time they took him out of school and took him to the hospital. And they cut a piece of bone out of his hip and they put it on his hand. He showed me that big ugly scar there on his hand. And I looked at him like, Dad, why did they do that? He said, I don't know. They never told me. So they just experimented on him. And there was nothing he can do. But I share this story about historical trauma because that was impacting me today without me knowing it, that it was affecting me. So ever since I was in high school, it was like I was a bad teacher magnet from high school to college. But it was me doing the work, like in Tlingit culture, we call it balancing out. Like my generation, we're here to make the balance because of that trauma that happened. And so I had to say something, you know, when I graduated and had to, you know, give a speech. I said, well, I didn't learn math. I only know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I never learned history. I just named the subjects and not the people. And I said, we are the future generation. I'm not prepared. So what I found was in doing that my village took it upon themselves to fire those bad teachers and got some good teachers in. And so this led up to when I was going to college too, I would get these, you know, sometimes racist teachers who really, so I continued that, but it led up until I was working at the University of Washington and working on a project there with a white doctor who was always saying and doing offensive things. It would really upset me. And that's how you recognize historical trauma, when you have a really strong reaction, emotional reaction. And he was a psychologist too. He was like it all rolled up in one, medical and the school, you know, education system. Like, so people come into our life to help show us what we need to heal. And so you know, I try to tell him, man, you just can't keep making me mad like this. You know, I was working with Native people who end up in Harborview from traumatic injuries. I said, I have to be on my best for them. And he was a psychologist, so he'd be like, well, it's okay, how do you feel? And I said, no. So I just went home and prayed about it. I'm like, okay, this is enough. Where does this anger originate? And then I could see my dad in the hospital there. I could feel his pain. I could feel him all alone. And so that historical trauma was passed on to me, manifesting and attracting people in my life that I needed, I'm here to help heal myself and maybe them. And so what I did was to pray to forgive those people that harmed my dad, both the education and the medical. And then on this doctor here today and now, like he, you know, and I prayed for him. And really spiritually, I just thanked him, did it in my prayer for him, helping me recognize the healing that I needed to do. And so I let it go. And after that, he didn't make me angry. He didn't bring up those feelings. And we end up with that study too. We had to write a paper about it, a qualitative paper. And he was insisting that we use one of his articles in our paper, which I didn't want to do. I read it, and it was supposed to be about a native healer, and it wasn't. I'm like, this is not how Native healers work. I don't want to use this. We should be citing Native doctors and Native working on our own projects and studies. He kept insisting, I kept insisting, no, and finally I'm just like, okay, I got to walk away. And so I said, I'm taking myself off this project. And then, and so I did, but my other friends I work with, coworkers, which we are all natives, it was a Native program. I said, I'm not working on it anymore. We would have to meet with our director once a month. So they went in to meet with our director. And she asked, where's Sweetwater? They told her what happened. They're like, why? What? We need her. Get her back here. And they're like, so our director took it upon herself to remove the white doctor from our paper. And so us natives, 3 native, wrote it ourselves. And so that's what we have. But I share that too, because once we do the work, do the healing, those people are no longer needed in our life. And I've never seen that doctor ever again after that. And the healing was able to take place. So that's some of my historical trauma healing I share. Because, we don't do it just for us, but for future generations. And we can heal. Like I said, my dad is now my ancestor. He's joined our ancestors. So we help heal him and heal us and future generations.
Sweetwater, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. It was so healing and so helpful. I think a lot of us are dealing with workplace microaggression or something, and we're wondering, this is kind of relatively minor. Why am I so upset by this? And I think this perspective that this is happening and it's rooted in historical trauma that your ancestors experienced, and you have to go back there. And for those of us who are causing the microaggression, we have to go back there too and understand why are we acting in this aggressive way is also rooted in our ancestors and the historical trauma that they inflicted onto other people, because we couldn't have inflicted that trauma without it harming us too. Obviously, the harm is very different, but this has been such a healing conversation, and I just want to ask, how can people support you? How can they participate in your workshops? Oh, thank you so much. This is great. Please, everyone, I urge you to follow Sweetwater, to hire Sweetwater, to bring her to your organizations and to do this healing work with the people there. And you see how in just 1 hour, how deep we were able to go in such a short time period. And I just want to thank everyone who's been on, and thank you, Sweetwater. I don't know if you have a few more minutes, if there's anyone who has any questions that they would like to ask to close out. But I do want to be mindful that it is now 1 o'clock and our regularly scheduled time is coming to an end.
Well, I'd like to just thank everyone for joining us today. I am working on doing webinars and that people can join in. I'm going to keep it at a low cost. I call quarantine costs. And the goal is to reach more people. And so this is the way I make my living too. This is how I was called to do this work, to share our stories, to work on our healing. And I donate my proceeds also to a local organization, Helping Hands in Washington. We're doing awesome work to support our community and actually all of Washington. Anyone who needs help, they're there. So part of my proceeds will go to them too. So thank you again for joining us, and have a blessed day, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. And they say healing to just hear each other's stories. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story and experiences, and thank you so much.
All right.